Pete here from Comic Books Transformed, where we talk about all of the streaming show and movie adaptations of your favorite comic books. And today is kind of a special episode for me and Brian, my co-host over there, because we're actually just talking about a show that's based on a comic. That's kind of unique today.
Oh my God, we're doing the thing we said we were going to do.
Whoa. Yeah, we have been covering other things like, Star Wars shows and Willow, and I understand there's even a Willow comic and and definitely a lot of Star Wars comics. But today we're just talking about Doom Patrol season 4, episodes 5 and 6.
Yeah, this week we split up. We would normally cover Doom Patrol and Willow, but we decided to split it up because Doom Patrol has its mid-season break after this episode. I'm sorry, with this episode, and then Willow is done next week. So we're going to wrap that up next week, and then we're not really sure what we're doing after exactly yet. So
yeah, we're thinking the Last of Us, which
okay, you do want to do it. Okay, yeah.
Heck yeah,
I'm excited.
So anyway, guys, last week we did a top 10 list for all the things that we covered in 2022, and it happened to be 22 different things that we reviewed. So that was a nice little coincidence. So go check that video out too. Brian was actually on my other channel, The Lastercast, recently, where we talked about the Evil Dead Rise trailer too. So you can go over to The Lastercast and check that out. But without further ado, for all of you many Doom Patrol fans out there, let's talk about the last 2 episodes of this part of the season. So Brian, you were saying that we should focus on each individual character first, right?
Yeah, I mean, they tend to just go with various pairings of characters in these episodes, and since we're covering 2, maybe we just kind of cover the scenarios of pairings that they had throughout these episodes.
Okay, sounds good. Sounds good.
The first thing I want to call out though is that the recap of episode 5, which is Youth Patrol, right?
Youth Patrol, yes,
was completely focused on recapping the previous episode with Dorothy and Space Case, and they weren't in the episode at all, or episode 6. So they're still completely absent, and I don't know why they showed that before the episode, because they weren't a part of the episode at all.
Yeah. I didn't watch that recap, but I can understand why that would be kind of confusing, especially because they reference a lot of things from like previous seasons in these last 2 episodes too.
Yes.
Especially all the stuff with the Sisterhood of Dada too.
Yes.
That's a big thing in these 2 episodes. I mean, honestly, before we even get into the individual character moments or the pairings, I was just going to ask you, like, maybe we could just kind of slowly just kind of break down exactly what's going on. Because
Sure.
As I was like summing this up and I was writing it out, I was looking at this one website that has a review to kind of keep myself in order. Okay, this happened. And then my computer, it said, oh, you got a virus from this website. And I got all freaked out, right? But I almost felt like I was on drugs just writing about this show and taking notes. So I'm like, what the fuck is actually happening on this show?
So the show is the main overarching things this season have been the Buttpocalypse and the return of Immortus.
Right.
These last 2 episodes, we seemingly have solved the Buttpocalypse, as all the characters like to call out multiple times these past 2 episodes. But we know that's not exactly true. They left a cliffhanger in one of the episodes where Madame Rouge asks Cliff to kill the last zombie werebutt, and they kind of just fade to black, and he's kind of questioning if he should do it or not after killing the zombie Darren Jones. Yes. So we find out that he does not, and that threat is back on the table. The other threat has been the return of Immortus, which the Knights Templar are very afraid of. So that's Willoughby and his group over there, or the most powerful mages in existence, according to them.
Yes.
And their bunny.
Yes. Right.
So in order to return Immortus to life, his followers need to return. I don't know what exactly it is. There's aspects of is it immortality or himself that were given or taken by Niles Calder and somehow infused into the main cast, which gives them their longevity. We've always talked about how all these characters don't age, and they don't even comment on it really. Rita's been around since the 30s, or maybe even earlier than that. Same for Larry. Cliff is a little bit younger, I suppose. He's probably born in maybe the 60s or 70s. Jane, I guess it was in the hippie era, so I mean, maybe she was born in the 50s or something. Well, I'm sorry, Kay.
Okay.
And then that kind of wraps up that group. Cyborg is not really counted among that, and I guess Madame Rouge isn't either. So the reason why they're all still kicking around and they look exactly the same over decades, because the first couple of episodes in the first season, they jumped a lot of time. They skipped around quite a bit. So in the episode where Rita was revisiting her movies, there was kind of this purple stuff being taken out of her that we thought had something to do with emotions or something like that. But it turns out it was just her, whatever was keeping her young. She wakes up in this episode after being unconscious in Youth Patrol, and notices that she's beginning to age. She has wrinkles in her face, and it's very noticeable. Her, although I didn't really see much of a difference. I guess her hair was a little discolored too, like a little going a little gray here and there.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's pretty good summation of everything. I'm actually kind of confused with Mohinder's character, Mohinder from Heroes, like his character on the show. So he's essentially a operative of Immortus, right?
Yes. So Immortus has basically promised the people working under him whatever they wanted. He's going to rewrite history or existence and give them exactly what they want. And what Mr. 104 wants is to just be a stable person. He doesn't want his molecules to, I don't know. I don't know even what was it? Is this going to explode or?
Yeah, dude, that's what I'm talking about. It was like very confusing because they had these like flashbacks where Larry would see himself in the ant farm and they would like take off his protective gear and it would kill the people that was around him. And then I think they would do a similar thing to what is his name's Dr. Mr. 104.
Yeah, he's kind of almost like Metamorpho in the sense that he can control the elements on the elements.
Yeah.
Which I think is funny because I think originally he was Mr. 103, and then they added another element, so it's 104. But now technically there's I believe it's 118 elements on the periodic table. But they haven't changed his name, I guess.
Okay. So like they were both prisoners of the ant farm. So like in this world, in this Doom Patrol world, there's definitely like people that are like mutants. And I think that they are metahumans, just like they have them in DC, right?
Yeah.
And they just kind of focus on the really weird ones on this show. And they're all many of them were prisoners of the ant form or the Bureau of Normalcy, right? And then not all of them though have this immortal power. Just the specific Doom Patrol main characters, excluding Cyborg. And then Madame Rouge, the reason why she's young is just because she used a time machine, right?
The time machine aspect, and I imagine there's some Mystique stuff going on there too, where she's making herself look a certain way, I guess.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, cool. So then why don't we go ahead and do the pairings? You want to go from characters that we...
Let's start with Larry, Mr. 104, since we've already been pretty heavily talking about them, right?
Let's do it.
So, as you mentioned, we're gonna when we last saw the characters 2 episodes ago, because the last episode was all about Dorothy. Everyone woke up in the theater except for Rita, and Keeg had left Larry and gone into Mr. 104, and then they all woke back up in the theater.
Yeah.
So Larry went out to go search for Keeg, and he eventually does find Mr. 104. And like you said, they just kind of go into like flashbacks of both their times in the ant farm. And they kind of come to an understanding. There's definitely some sexual tension there, as Cliff calls out in the second episode, the 6th episode, I mean. And they kind of come to an alliance. Mr. 104 wants to help them. He doesn't. They don't think that what Immortus is doing is right, because he thinks he's going to hurt people to get his way, and they're seemingly going to work together.
Yeah.
And this is whole weird dimension. I don't remember the name of the dimension they go to with all the scissor men.
Oh, Quarth? Is it Quarth? Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah. So the scissor men are they are taken from like the first arc or maybe the second arc of the Grant Morrison Doom Patrol. Like they're from very early on in that comic, and Quarth is where they come from. I don't remember if there's any kind of connection to Immortus. I don't think so. Um, and I also don't. There is a character in the Grant Morrison run who like can draw things and they come to life. I just don't remember if it's that character that we see later in episode 6. You know,
Oh, you mean Cyber
Wally.
Friend?
Well, no.
That guy. Oh,
Yeah.
He's the one that did that. God damn, I completely missed that.
Well, see, the show's like really fucking confusing and weird. It's the kind of show where like you really truly have to be paying attention every single episode. You have to remember things from 2 or 3 seasons ago. You know.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just, it's a very kind of dense show, and I appreciate that. You know, they respect their viewers, their fans. That's for sure.
Definitely, yeah. And I would rather this dense continuity where you got to remember things than rather than a episode of the week where where everything's kind of reset, almost like a sitcom, sort of, you know.
Yeah, and I hate exposition stuff, and this show doesn't really waste too much time with expository dialogue.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, so okay, they go into this weird dimension, and so now we're already going into episode 6 for Larry and for Mr. 104, right?
Yeah, and they end up where it ends up where Larry's just captured, and we finally find out what future Key showed baby Key, and that was basically that he has to fly himself into the sun in the future because the werebutts tear up in his suit.
Yeah.
So and then Larry essentially willingly gives up his longevity at Kee's discretion. So the only person left with the longevity is Cliff.
Right. Yeah. And so since we're kind of going into the Quarth stuff and we're talking about the Scissormen, I just wanted to comment about how scary an image that is. Like these like black suit kind of men just walking around with gigantic scissors. And the sound design is actually really good for these 2 episodes because they're walking around with these scissors. You just assume that they're very sharp because there's constantly that noise of the scissor opening, that shing shing noise. And often the scissor men have their scissors over someone's neck, right? Like multiple characters. Really disturbing stuff. You know, the Doom Patrol comic from Grant Morrison is all the way back from the 80s. And I think that a reason why I like it so much, both the comic and the show, is that there's so much like horror imagery in it too. You know, I've really gotten into horror in the past couple of years.
Yeah.
And sometimes there's more horrific stuff than sort of superhero reference stuff in this show.
Yeah, I would agree with that statement. Yeah, and the Scissorman also, I kept being reminded by an older kind of horror game called Clock Tower, where the main antagonist was this dude with giant scissors.
Oh shit! Okay, that's cool. What year did that come out? In the 80s?
No, that was a PS1 or PS2 era game, so it was probably late 90s.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Or maybe early 2000s.
Yeah, but you know, it's just all this batshit crazy weird stuff that Grant Morrison imagined, and they just put it into the show. It's really impressive, like what they put into this show. Is there anything else that you want to say about Keeg and Larry and Mr. 104?
No, actually, the last thing I want to say about I don't remember what happened with Mr. 104. I know Larry went back into the portal after coming home to the mansion. He went after Key, but I don't know what happened to Mr. 104. I don't think he went in the portal. I mean, did he stay in the mansion?
I think he might have. Yeah.
I don't know we didn't see what happened to him, so I'm curious where he went.
Yeah.
And if maybe he's going to get eaten by the werebut.
Yeah. It's so funny because like the actor that plays Mr. 104, I remember him as Mohinder from Heroes. You know, this is gonna sound weird, but like I think he's like really attractive on this show. Like I think they're making him really attractive, and I'm like, I don't remember Mohinder being such a like leading man kind of guy. They kind of played up Mohinder's sort of nerdiness on Heroes.
Yeah, he was like a nerdy scientist, always talking about his research.
Yeah.
And yeah, they're definitely playing up his being a attractive love interest for Larry, which is something that he needs in his life.
Agreed.
He feels like he lacks.
Yeah. Well, you know what it is? It's like I was talking about the sound design for this show. The cinematography for this show is very good too. It's just sort of more dynamic than your typical comic book show. And a lot of the stuff, especially like the MCU stuff that we cover on Disney Plus, it's definitely more interesting to look at, right? And it's funny because they even make like a reference to Tim Burton at one point, like Cyborg's friend. Someone says like, "Oh, these Tim Burton rejects," and they play into that. What's that?
I think Cliff said that.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, one of them. You know, everyone makes fucking references, right? But you know, they're playing into that sort of gothic side that DC had for a while because of those Tim Burton Batman movies. And it's just like a lot more interesting to look at than most of the stuff that we cover on this channel. So I think that's why I was noticing how attractive Mohinder was, or Mr. 104, because they do all these images of him, like it looks like something out of like a 1950s sci-fi movie or something, where he's like this, you know, wearing this suit and standing on a hill or something. And a lot of times when I look up imagery to use for thumbnails and stuff for our show, it's him that they use.
Interesting.
Yeah, I guess I should stop like having some sort of man crush on Mohinder right now. We can move on to the next pairing. So, do you want to do Rouge and Rita?
Yeah, we could do that one. I think this one had a little bit less of consequence on the affecting the episode. Maybe it was a little more personal, I guess, and not as well. They do go find what's
Wally.
Wally.
Yeah.
Wally Sage.
Wally Sage. That's right. It's easy to remember because just think like the second flash or the third flash, and then Vic Sage, like the question, right?
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was in Youth Patrol. That Larry story was kind of self-contained there, and then everybody else goes off on this little team-fueled adventure. So Rita wakes up and feels herself aging. She looks older, and she goes rifling through Miles' stuff to kind of find something to help her look younger again. And she finds some weird curse thing, and it happens to affect everybody in the room that's there. So, you know, the whole gang minus Larry, essentially. Right. And they all turn into teenagers. For some reason, Cliff is a cowboy.
Yes. It's
I don't know why Cliff is a cowboy exactly, but, you know, everybody's got braces and glasses, and Jane's like a hippie, I guess. And they go to try and they're trying to go find Willoughby's
mentor, his mentor,
to help reverse the hex, because it was an untested thing. And they get sidetracked by some people hanging out behind a gas
station. Right. And
then this everything goes to hell because everybody goes their separate ways. Rouge and Rita go off on their own there, and they eventually just have this kind of bonding moment where Madame Rouge has this really great line of dialogue about how she feels, and I know you kind of wrote this out in your notes. I don't know if you have any more comments on it than I did, but
yeah,
she's essentially confessing how sorry she is to Rita and how she feels about her own life and then the mistakes she's made, and she doesn't know how to move forward, essentially.
Right. I was not really a fan of Rouge last season. I've said this a couple of times. But this season, boy, am I like a complete 180. I think that they really have played up the character. And the one line that you said I wrote down, it's this. My mother used to always say that heartbreak stains the soul. Well, I believe that to be true, except for me, it's different. It's like a void, a chasm, standing between me and any hope of finding a true, meaningful connection. Maybe that's why I'm the way I am. Maybe by now I am the chasm. That is a really well-written line for a comic book adaptation. I don't think that the Madame Rouge character has any kind of line like that in the comics. She's not really in the Grant Morrison run as far as I've seen. But it's a really pretty way of saying basically I've lost my soul. Like my actions have cost me to lose my soul. And I just think it's really well written, and it sort of elevates the show. There's one thing we should also point out too, is that she looks like herself for the majority of the episode.
Yes.
And she claims that she didn't breathe in the smoke. And then later on we find out that she actually did. She just like changed herself to look back like her normal self.
A la Mystique.
I love Mystique, very good. And so there's this great moment where her and Rita are sitting on the bench, and they both are like teenage girls, and it's after they've sort of had this catharsis. So, really great stuff. This episode in general, once we go over to the Cliff and Jane stuff, and it kind of ties in with Cyborg in that episode too. There's just all these moments in this Youth Patrol episode where the characters are just sitting, sometimes often just staring into space or like talking to each other. And it's just this moment, a lot of moments of like pondering things and asking questions about themselves. And it's just so fucking good. It's better than some kind of random fight you could just shoehorn into the story,
Yeah, I mean, there's been very few actual fights over the course of the show. It really is just a lot of dialogue and character development, which I fucking love.
Yeah. One major thing that's been intertwined with comic books or comic book adaptations for a while now has been trauma, like dealing with the trauma of the snap in the MCU and dealing with the trauma of all the things that have happened in the Marvel movies, right? And they always talk about trauma in these reviews. But the Doom Patrol show is truly about trauma. It's just not this sort of manufactured, like global sci-fi event trauma bullshit. It's like real life human horrible trauma,
Yeah, agreed, yeah.
because even Larry's origin is sort of sci-fi, right? But like the whole homosexual angle in being
Oh
in
yeah,
the
it's his repressed life as a closeted homosexual is his trauma, and then his being ostracized by his family, his job, and everything, and then the actual accident that happens to him closes him off even more, so he has no outlet, and that's fucking traumatic.
yeah. So I mean, I really, really did love those scenes where they're sitting by the pool and stuff. And I just kind of had this moment where I was watching it and I was like, this is why I like this show. It has nothing to do with fucking MacGuffins or looking for things or fucking cameos. It's just about these characters and dealing with their lives,
Yeah, agreed.
So Cyborg, because you were talking about doing pairings. Cyborg's with his friend.
We didn't quite finish with Rita and Rouge here. I mean, they do go back to the Bureau of Normalcy, and that's where they run into Will Sage, and that's how we're tying that into the end there. I don't remember exactly where they ended up, but I know Rita thinks she killed Will, and I think they're still at the Bureau. At
Wally.
The episode.
Wally, like the third flesh. Yeah. In that sequence where they do free Wally, that is like a fucking horror movie at one point. That is really intense.
Yeah, I agree.
Like her face is fucking melted. She turns into this blob monster, and he looks like a corpse. All of a sudden, she's like rolling towards him like Critters 2, and he's screaming as he's being engulfed by this flesh ball. I was like, holy shit.
And again, speaking of trauma, in regards to Rita here, I mean, this is the person that actually pulled the trigger, I believe, with killing her. God, what the fuck was that guy's name now? Like her love interest from the last season in the past. The guy with the bird cage in his chest. I can't remember his name.
Yeah. Well, okay. So see, this is where I'm showing I'm a bad fan. So Wally is not that guy? He's not the birdcage guy?
No. Wally's the one that killed him. That actually, pulled the trigger and killed him, I believe.
Oh, shit. Okay, well, that's fucked up. That's why she was...
That's why she has that kind of, anxiety attack there, and she turns into the blob form because she just can't handle it,
Oh, okay. I took it as, she felt guilty for his death, and so she was overwhelmed by that. But okay, that's even better. So that makes this guy much more villainous than I was thinking.
Yeah, I mean, and clearly we see that at the end of the episode. It's one of the last things we see.
Episode 6, yeah. So I think the way it ends is Rita has lost her longevity. She was the first one to lose it. She turns into a blob, but then she's able to get back to her regular form, and then she's under the impression that she squashed Wally and he's gone.
Yes, I think so. And I think they're still in the Bureau, and the alarms are going off.
Right, okay, so that's the end of episode 6. The episode 6 is really great because it's like every storyline sort of builds up to this cliffhanger point, and then there's this sort of oh shit moment. So it is a good stopping point for a mid-season finale.
Yeah, but I what I find really interesting is that I feel like this is the kind of convergence that we would get at the very end of the season. You know, like the end with like the Candlestick Maker or
Mr. Nobody.
Mr. Nobody in the first season. Like this feels like more like that, but I suppose that just means that the back half will be about actually facing Immortus,
Yeah.
Rather than just bringing him back.
And so I had a question for you with that. Who do you think Immortus is going to be? Do you think it's going to be like a completely different actor that we've never seen, or is it going to be someone that we have seen before?
Well, the comic version of Immortus is this kind of like scrawny, bald old man who's like a general and he's been alive forever.
Right.
I'm curious how they're going to cast this.
Yeah.
They have took some liberties with casting some of the villains in the past year.
Yeah.
So it's possible they'll go some, but at the same time, they've made some fairly accurate ones too. Like Gargax was like very comic accurate. The Space Case's dad too. Terminax, I guess.
Yeah.
Very comic accurate. The Living Brain, even like the robot body he was in, like
yeah.
A lot of things led there. But Mr. Nobody, I guess, was a little different. Mr. 104 is different. He was just like a older white looking dude.
Yeah.
So yeah, they occasionally will just completely change something, but they'll also keep it exactly the same. So I'm curious. I mean, right now all we see is this kind of like a statue with glowing purple lights right now. That's all we really see of what Immortus is right now. So whether they give him a form or not, I'm not sure.
You don't think that he might come back as Niles Calder? Like it might be Timothy Dalton?
No, I don't think so.
No?
I think that he's gone from the show. I don't think he's coming back. That's Timothy Dalton. He was at least at one time he was a popular actor. I mean, he was James Bond.
Yeah, fuck yeah. And he was on Penny Dreadful, which I also love too.
Yeah, so I think maybe that his exit from the show in season 3 was this it. Like I don't expect a cameo from him again.
Okay, all right. We won't put any bets on that then. That's fine.
Wait a minute. You know what? Though, wait a second. Isn't that what Dorothy's like goal is to kind of like get, just talk to her father and just like let everything out?
I don't know.
Maybe you're onto something.
There also was a picture of him in the, Bureau of Normalcy too.
There was?
Yeah. At one point, Rita looks on the wall and she's like, Niles. She sees a picture of him on the wall.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, you know what? Maybe that's how Dorothy gets roped into this later on, because that's what she's looking for. She just wants to talk to her dad and let out everything she kept in and never got to say.
Yeah.
So that would be a way to sort of do that, maybe, or confront it at least.
Yeah, I think it's a potential. I haven't heard anything about Timothy Dalton returning, but I think that if they wanted to have some like gravitas, if like this is going to be like the final season, that'd be a great way to make it all kind of full circle and like up the stakes.
I mean, I think in general the loss of the character's longevity is a great full circle kind of thing, and this would be a great place to potentially end the show. Yep. And I think, which I think it will be ending, unfortunately. But yeah, I mean, based on the comic origin of General Immortus was that he drank some potion to extend his life, and he hired Niles to create something new. But in this sense here, Niles has taken something from him, so in order to further his experiments here. So I'm curious. I think that's a possibility. I'm not completely ruling it out because I still do think that it's a long shot to have Timothy Dalton come back, but it's not a bad idea.
Okay, what about this? What about James Gunn?
Okay. Yeah, he does like the show.
Isn't the whole idea about Immortus they're talking about like he basically comes back and he can like reset everything?
Yeah.
That would be kind of funny, wouldn't it?
That would be a very funny joke, and James Gunn has already appeared on Harley Quinn, the animated series. So.
Oh yeah, that's awesome. Okay. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. Well, so before you were talking about how some characters are comic accurate and some characters have been changed. one character that's a great example is Shelley Byron, who was a man in the Doom Patrol comics, the Fog, right?
Yes.
Right. So the Fog or Shelley Byron on this season has been kind of alluded to. Jane wants to get with her, right? Like Jane feels this attraction towards her, and she's kind of seeking her out for a few of the episodes. And so this could kind of bring us to Jane and Cliff. Um, at one point, we do see Shelley Byron come back. Jane goes into her sweet shop, but before we get to that, we should talk about Jane as a teenager.
Yes. So, but the things I want to say about Jane here is that Jane is looking for purpose beyond Kay. She thinks that she feels this attraction to Shelley or the Fog, and she wants to explore that. But at the same time, she doesn't feel like it's her place to do that because it's not her body. And I think that's a really interesting angle to have. The other aspect of this, you're talking about Jane as a teenager. There was a line that you mentioned that she came after what was her name? Miranda. She was created after Miranda was like gone, which I don't think we knew. So this was essentially Jane's first time actually being a teenager. So she didn't really know what to do. So she while she's really high, potentially hallucinates Kay, and who kind of gives the okay to move forward with a relationship, and that because saying it's our body, but she still gets cold feet, and ultimately, and then she does leave the Fog sweet shop, which I guess you could just get to from anywhere because I don't remember how they got there in the first place.
Yeah, that was one of those episodes where they're just sort of like walking in the woods, and then all of a sudden they kind of stumble upon these.
Yeah, but it looks like when she left, she's just like immediately in her room.
yeah, I know. Yeah,
I didn't follow that.
Yeah, it's probably like another dimension or something like that. But like, and this show's chock full of other dimensions. That is one of my favorite parts about this show is the philosophical component where it's like, okay, Jane is just essentially a survival mechanism. She's a personality that was created by Kay so that Kay could deal with her sexual abuse. And that's such a weird kind of philosophical fantasy sci-fi concept to be like, well, you never had a teenage existence. You're an adult, but you never were a teenager. Now you get to be a teenager. I love that. I also love the idea of like, I'm just a mechanism. I'm just a personality to keep this woman alive. I don't want to use her body for my own pursuits. I think that's so like unique. I don't really know if I've ever seen that in a story before.
Yeah, the closest thing I can think of is Psylocke from X-Men.
Yeah, that is a good.
Braddock is forced into the body of Quanon, and there's some guilt over there, and even though now they're separate beings and all that. Yeah, that's the closest thing. But I really like this angle the story's taking, and they also I found it interesting that in the underground, all of the personas were doing the puzzle, and I think we're going to ultimately see Jane complete the puzzle as Kay kind of foresaw. Be the only one that can actually finish it, because it also seems like she has a lot more pieces than the others did.
I agree.
But I still think she's going to be capable of doing it.
I agree with you on that one. I actually, while you were saying that, I did think of another example of a situation like this. There's the weird scenario in Wonder Woman 1984.
Okay.
And this is almost like the antithesis, because that was one of the big complaints about that movie, was that essentially they were just using the body of some random guy.
Yeah, that still is really weird.
Yeah. So it's almost like the antithesis where she's like, I can't do that. This is not my body, Yeah. So yeah, you mentioned that one hallucination part where she's by the pool. I think that was maybe my favorite scene in both of these episodes. I just really liked.
I'm going to one up you there. I think that my favorite scene was was it after that? I don't remember where it was, but Cliff is talking to Jane in her room. I think it's after the Fog, and he takes off the glove.
It's after that.
he says that you are capable of love and worthy of love, and he takes the glove off that he's trying to reserve for, touching his grandson, and he does it to show that people care and that about Jane, regardless if she thinks he deserves it or not.
Right. That line that he says is like, whether you think you deserve it or not, you can't stop people from loving you, or something like that. Like, yeah. And so, really great, really touching scene. Brendan Fraser's voice acting alone does so much for this show.
Yeah, I agree.
And I mean, we should always give credit. I never remember their fucking names, but we should always give credit for the guy that is Larry, but doesn't talk, right? And then the one who's Robot Man, but doesn't talk too.
Yeah, one of them is Matthew Zook. I don't remember which one is which.
Yeah.
And what's the other one's name? Damn it! I'm gonna have to look it up so we can get proper credit.
Yeah, they just do a fantastic job of miming everything, and the voice acting. What's it? Matt Bomber. Yeah. Matt Bomber, he's fantastic. His voice is fantastic on the show, and then Brendan Fraser's voice is fantastic too. I mean, Brendan Fraser's sort of having this like comeback right now with The Whale and everything like that, but he's just been so good on this show for years now.
Agreed. Yeah.
And then it's just so.
Negative band is Matthew Zook, ZUK, and then where's Cliff? No, I don't see it.
Yeah, and then like
Riley Shanahan. Sorry.
Well, excellent job. Yeah. So then, like, was the guy that did the fucking voice of Elmo? Was that was he the voice of Cliff's?
I don't think so. I think it's just a generic kind of voice that is having to sound like a mix of Elmo and Donald Duck to me.
Yeah.
Cliff's still hallucinating a little bit, and his glove oven mitt is now talking to him.
Yeah. So good. I mean, and there's a whole bunch of like jokes and stuff that we haven't even talked about. Like Kipling, as he gets younger and younger, it's real funny. He has that big mane of hair that's really great. I liked when he was like a true teenager, not just Mark Shepard, like young.
Looks like a squire.
Yeah, that was just so funny, And then like Cliff, when he's like a I don't know, like a preteen or like an early teen, he's got like his voice cracking and stuff. I fucking love that too. So good.
I also love the visual gag of him just like mainlining drugs and directly into his brain.
Yeah, ditto. And then one other thing too is that the show always kind of feels like a little bit behind. Like it almost feels like it's from the 90s. It doesn't mean that like the quality is not good. It's just that's the era it feels like it's from. It feels like it's from that Grant Morrison time.
Yep.
So when Jane calls one of the kids Euphoria, that kind of actually like took me out of it. I was like, oh.
I didn't even remember that line, to be honest. But yeah, I can understand that.
Yeah, it was when the kids were like behind the gas station smoking or whatever.
Okay, so when they first met them. Okay,
yeah. Anyway, so we didn't cover Cyborg and his friend yet.
Yes, so Cyborg also gets turned into a teen, and he decides to go swimming, I guess.
Yeah.
And ultimately, he's kind of just going back to that he abandoned his friends after his accident. And as he gets younger, he decides to go back to Detroit on his own, and he goes to visit his friend because he didn't know where else to go.
Yeah.
I don't really know what to make of that. I mean, like, I guess, he could have stayed with the group. He could have went to see his dad, I guess, but he went to go see his friend anyways. I don't really know why that happened. I don't really have any insight into why that choice was made.
Yeah, I'm sort of torn. I have a whole little fucking dialogue or monologue I could do about the Cyborg on this show, but to address what you were saying, there is this character whose name I forget from the Gerard Way run, and I thought they were introducing him when they showed a Space Case, right? Like Casey. Yep. He was the kid with the spray can. I was like, oh, that's going to be that kid from the Gerard Way run, this African American kid. And in the comics, him and his family travel into like a D&D realm. And I didn't know if like maybe they were trying to do that with Cyborg's friend, because they reference D&D a lot in the sixth episode.
Yeah.
And so I was wondering if like they were kind of maybe like mixing those a little bit together.
That's an excellent point. I don't really remember what that kid and his family did in the comic.
Yeah.
like what their importance in the story was. But maybe I could totally see that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so with the Cyborg thing, if you'll forgive me, I had like 3 points I wanted to make about Cyborg. Like with Cyborg in the comics, he's a fun character, and his body horror aspect to his character is interesting, but then that's kind of where it ends, right? He doesn't have this big supporting cast besides his dad, and he doesn't have this rogues gallery or anything like that. This show, however, adds so many layers to the Cyborg character that's just not there in the comic. And I think it's really interesting because they do try to play up the idea of like he's African American, he's different from these other characters that are mostly white characters, right? Um, and they try to play it up with his friends, like the way that they talk and stuff like that. But then there is like this sort of there's like the stereotypical African American thing that you see, where like the way that they talk and stuff. It's like, oh, did a white guy write this dialogue? Which they probably did. But then he has this whole nerdy kind of aspect, which goes against that stereotypical portrayal, right? Where he's like playing D&D and they're all into like building robots and stuff. I personally have a lot of experience with African American students, and you know, I know some that probably would be interested in robots and D&D, but that's not the way they're normally portrayed on shows and movies, right? And so I thought that was very interesting. That's a very interesting aspect. So he had this pre-existing interest in robots, and in the 6th episode, you see that they actually had a robot that looked very much like fucking Megatron, by the way. Right?
Yeah.
Right. Like that they designed a robot, they fantasized about a robot, and then he kind of becomes a robot as a superhero. You know, I think that's very interesting.
Yes, I agree there. And I was almost wondering if somehow when they were once they first realized they can create something they draw, I thought they were gonna have Cyborg return to with the armor on. Yeah.
Totally. I totally thought that too. But they're adding these layers to him, and one of my favorite things from, I believe it was the past season, maybe it was the season before, but in a previous season, everyone kind of has like their imagined like good version of themselves, like the self they wanted to aspire to, and his was like this African American general, right? And so it's interesting that like he had that connection with this character, this sort of military character, and that kind of made him the way he was as a superhero. Then he has this whole robot fantasy, and that's part of his superhero persona.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I just love these little details that those don't exist in the comic at all.
I think I would go out on a limb and say, I mean, I know there's not very many live action versions of Cyborg, but or even animated too. Like I think this might be my favorite version of Cyborg.
Fuck yeah. Shit yeah. I mean the Snyder cut version of Justice League portrays Cyborg in a different way than the Whedon cut version of Justice League.
Agreed.
And I like the Snyder cut version better than the Whedon cut.
I don't even remember anymore. I think I'm almost blocking those movies out at this point.
Yeah, I think most of us are too. But yeah, I just think that like they've kind of always done this like reference to like, oh, he's gonna talk like this because he's African American, but they weave it in with really interesting character details that are just completely missing from the Cyborg comic book character. So if there is supposed to be an ongoing Doom Patrol comic coming out soon, and if Cyborg was to actually join that team and be more like this Cyborg, I actually would be very happy with that.
Yeah, I would too. Although I think he's, I mean, he's more in the big leagues with the Justice League more these days than anything else. So I'm not sure they would have him be on multiple teams, or even this kind of more removed from the DC universe sort of team that the Doom Patrol tends to be.
Yeah. I need to do some research and see who's writing that title. But it's interesting. Yeah. I don't think it's Gerard Way.
Yeah, I mean, we're not talking about Way of the Worlds, right?
No. There's a brand new ongoing Doom Patrol comic coming out soon.
Interesting. I'm gonna have to pick that up, but I gotta read Way of the Worlds too.
Yeah, because the original Doom Patrol comic was like a Vertigo thing, or maybe it was DC. I think it was Vertigo at one point. And then the Gerard Way version, it was the
Young Animal.
Right. So I think that this
Young Animal.
Young Animal. This next one is going to be completely straight up just mainstream DC.
Interesting.
Yeah, yeah. So I think it'll be less weird than even the Doom Patrol show.
We'll see. I'll probably pick it up now that I'm going back to the comic store every week again, and God's spending way too much money.
Oh, I know, man. I understand that. So, do you have anything else you want to say about any of the arcs for the characters?
No, I think I'm good here. I'm a little bummed that we're in a mid-season break here. I don't think I've ever had that. They've ever done that with the show before, but hopefully you'll be back sooner than later.
Yeah, agreed. I really dig this show, and I think I maybe even dig the season more than other seasons too. Every season has had some really high points, though. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then next week, Brian and I will be back. We're going to talk about the final 3 episodes of Willow. I know you guys are dying to see that one, and
Hey,
yeah,
I like the show, man. I'm like one of like 5 people that actually defend the show.
yeah. I think on with the website. Do you ever go to IO9? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Whatever, like Gizmodo, I think is what it is now.
Yeah.
I think they're actually big fans of that on there. So
Yeah, I mean, like, there's definitely flaws to it, and I really didn't like episode 5 at all. But I don't know. There's redeeming things there that I'm enjoying. That I look forward to watching it every Wednesday, and I'm based on the general fan reaction of it. Like, I know it's not going to get renewed, and I know it's going to be some crazy cliffhanger or something like that, and it's never going to get answered.
yeah, I think you're right about that. But if you guys have suggestions on what else Brian and I can cover, like we said, we're going to try to do The Last of Us coming up. I had some interest in doing maybe some of those DC animated movies too. We'll see.
All
But
those stuff got removed from HBO Max.
wait, for real?
Yeah, we were talking about Super Sons, and that just got removed from HBO Max.
The fuck? Jesus Christ. Okay. It's craziness. So yeah, but we're here. This is actually our first video together for 2023, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're here for all 2023. Brian and I get together every week, and we'll be giving you more reviews of comic book adaptations. We'll see y'all next week.